Okay, I think we're live. So, welcome to episode 5 of the WPCampus Podcast, a podcast for those using WordPress in higher education. So, today's topic is how does WordPress work as a learning management system? What are the challenges in setting it up for this purpose? What are some of the best practices, great plugins, practical ways to actually use WordPress as an LMS? So, today we're going to try to answer those questions. And you can join the conversation on Twitter by using our WPCampus hashtag and learn more about WP Campus at WPCampus.org. I'm Andrew Richardson, and we've got a great panel to join us here today. We'll start with Joseph Ugoritz.
Hi, I'm Joe Ugoritz. I'm at Macaulay Honors College at the City University of New York. We have a very large, or somewhat large, WordPress multi-site installation. It's used for e-portfolios and personal websites and all kinds of teaching sites, including as an LMS for our undergraduate seminars.
Great. And next on our list is Kim Schibler.
Hi, I teach people how to build online courses using WordPress as one of the learning management systems, both using those plugins as well as community-based plugins to extend the possibilities for them.
Great. And next is Malcolm St Romaine.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Element Learning Management Solutions. We're based in Austin, Texas. We're a software company, and we help universities, government agencies, and nonprofits build WordPress learning management systems.
Awesome. And finally is Shanta Nathwani.
Hi, I'm Shanta. I teach at Sheridan College. I teach the web design stream in their capstone course as part of a joint program with the University of Toronto at Mississauga in Canada, where hopefully all you guys will come up depending on what the political landscape is in a few months.
Great. So let's start with a really, really basic question. And anybody who wants to jump in, just go ahead and jump in. But let's get a baseline here. What is an LMS? Why would let's just say what is an LMS and why would WordPress maybe work as an LMS for some users? And whoever wants to jump in, go for it. Anyone?
I'll go.
Great, thanks, Kim.
An LMS is a learning management system. They don't necessarily or weren't originally online, but now we've moved to the online version of that, just like we have with managing other things. WordPress makes a great LMS for multiple reasons. One, it's so open and there's multiple things you can do with the content. You can tweak it because it's open and easy to do. And then also, because there are already plugins, some of them specifically to extend learning management, some of them to help with, for example, forum support and, like Joseph mentioned, multi-site, where everyone can have their own page and share things. It's very extensible, so that's why it's a great LMS platform.
Who wants to jump in and extend that answer?
Great answer, Kim. We build systems that aren't just about blogging or websites. We use the core functionality that WordPress offers to integrate our WordPress systems back into whether it's content sites like Skillsoft or the accounting system, so that there can be a single sign-on. So from a traditional software development standpoint, WordPress provides a lot of those tools for teams who are interested in delivering those types of systems.
Great. So maybe the next question, I'll throw this to maybe Shanta or Joseph. How are you using WordPress as an LMS, or how are you helping others use it? Start with Joseph. Maybe I'll just choose somebody.
So we have courses that all of our students take in their first 2 years, and those courses need some kind of an online platform for both sort of sharing static content and for students to interact with one another and their professor, and to kind of design a public-facing presence for the research they're doing in the course and the learning that's going on, so that they can have a combination of shared collaborative, somewhat private work and work that they're going to present to the world and educated outsiders and within our own college community. So for us, that's a really kind of critical purpose that we didn't expect WordPress to serve when we first started using it, but it's really exploded in growth over the past years.
Yeah, and Shanta, we'll go to you next, because we had talked a little bit before the show started, and I thought that the way that you were interesting was the way that you were using WordPress was really, really interesting. So maybe sort of rehash that again for the wider audience.
Sure. So we use something called Slate, which is a product with Desire to Learn up here in Canada. Woot. And what it does is the college itself uses Slate. So we don't really have a say in, we do have some say in that we as instructors can choose what we use. But that is what the college has decided to use as their overall learning management system for things like registrations and things like communicating with the students and so on. So we've already got a system in place that we can use for things like drop boxes and grade books and enrollments. So we use that. Where WordPress comes in, and by the way, our website for Sheridan College is in Drupal.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay.
It's very upsetting. Anyway, but what we do use WordPress for, other than just the obvious teaching in our classes as part of our web design courses, is that we also use it for our forum. So using things like BuddyPress, BBPress, and we then direct our students to ask questions there. They can register on that forum separately from the current learning management system. And the way that we've devised it is that they get a web space assigned to them on our Phoenix server. And we have a huge number of account numbers, but what will happen is when they register, they choose which class they're in, and it automatically assigns them a number from that pool, giving them the password and everything else. Now they are available to use the forum, to use our tester, which is then available to the students. And then on the back end, what we as instructors use it for are things like grading, marking papers, and actually doing a lot of the checks and balances that we would normally have to do manually. So we pull it from Slate as our learning management system, drop it into our tester, do all of our testing, assign marks, assign comments, download it as a zip file, pop it back into Slate, and it's all done. Thanks to my co-instructor, Kira Howe, who actually devised this system probably about a year ago and has saved me about 10 hours a week worth of marking, minimum.
Wow. That's great. I've had instructors who will set up WordPress sites sort of on their own to do some of these things, and but it's really so. Using you as an example, Shanta, where you have a university or a college that has adopted maybe something like Blackboard or Slate or whatever, there's still lots of really good uses for side projects, smaller project, individual projects. So, I'm at the University of Alabama. We're a Blackboard school, and we're a huge school. I think we're up to 38,000 students. So when we talk about moving to something different, that is a massive undertaking. When you talk about doing individualized projects, that's maybe a little more reasonable, right? As long as you can find somebody who has the skill set on campus to do it and who will do it for you, then you can maybe do some of that sort of stuff. So I like that. I think that's something to keep in mind, even if you're at a larger school that is on Canvas, Blackboard, whatever, one of those larger systems. So what are the challenges that you all have noticed when using WordPress as an LMS? I mean, and that could be technical, it could be political. Yeah, Shanta, go ahead. You've already got your hands up.
So the biggest challenge that we're having is Our server, our Phoenix server, which hosts all of our WordPress accounts, including ours, is managed by the IT department. If we want anything done, we have to go to them. Sometimes that takes weeks. A couple of months ago, we actually had the entire server shut down because apparently something got in there that wasn't supposed to. It got spammed, it got something. Well, here's the thing. If they'd asked us, we would have been able to help you. They didn't. They did not lock it down appropriately from the beginning. So the problem that we're having is that the IT department thinks that they know better, but they don't know WordPress. They really don't. If you'd asked us what you needed us to do, we would have given you a list of recommendations. And the problem becomes they could easily just say, well, here, it's yours, now deal with it. The fact is, as a partial load instructor, I'm not full-time. There are contractual issues at hand. There are huge amounts of administration that go on. So I'm only paid the time I'm in class. So there's union issues, like there's just so much at work there. I can't even begin to tell you. I'll leave it at that.
Shanta, that is a point that we face with many of the clients that we deal with. The IT departments at universities, we know, are stretched thin for a number of different reasons. The one that I'll put out there first and foremost is that they have not just a handful, but probably dozens of different technologies that they have to be experts in. So when some professor or some staff member comes in and says, hey, we want to use this new content management tool to do some blogging sites to teach our kids how to do this, they're like, what? WordPress, PHP, MySQL? No. We're a Microsoft shop, and so we have to have everything in Microsoft, so that there can be pushback. The way that we've address this is that there are companies out there like, for example, WPEngine, who happen to be here in Austin. They focus exclusively on providing WordPress hosting, and they do a fantastic job.
Right.
You know, they're not going to be as cheap as a GoDaddy or a HostGator or a, they're not going to be $9 a month, but what you get is a level of service and technical understanding where the security issues that are addressed, the scalability issues that need to be addressed, all of that you're paying a little bit more for, but those types of issues get covered by the cost associated with, and the systems, they're just rock solid. We have a premier relationship with those people, and they do a fantastic job. So anyway, and there are other hosting companies that focus just on WordPress.
Yeah, and I'll agree with you on that. Here's the problem. You said one thing, money. The server that is being, and also there is also a concern about taking students' work and moving it off campus. Better yet, in our case, moving it to another country. Now, believe me, I've even got, so you mentioned WPEngine. Wonderful people. Shada, love her dearly. Everybody from GoDaddy to whoever. SiteGround even has an educational hosting package for any and all education people for free. As a matter of fact, right now, I noticed I was helping my students the other day. They've even got student accounts available for free. Right? So that's great stuff. Problem is it's in Bulgaria. So the biggest pull that we have, and then the other thing is if we move it off of campus, then guess who's responsible for it? Us. It's no longer then under the auspices of the college. So we basically then go rogue. But that also means then that there's more administration involved, and then we get the union screaming at us saying, oh, no, you're taking stuff away from our people. So it's not necessarily just a matter of workload. I get your point, and yes, in one case we've now just had it switched to another person. But there's this pull of where do you keep the students' work, where do you protect their privacy, and where is that stuff hosted?
Right.
So and it's not just even whether it's in the country or not, it's on campus and behind our firewalls.
Well, there's clearly political issues that have to be overcome. There's education issues, and when I say education, I mean providing the business
the student experience.
Well, I'm talking about the people who are potentially roadblocking the decision to be at another host, because it's up to somebody to make the right business decision, right? There's the technical decision and technical questions, there's the business decisions and the business questions. And business people should be making business decisions, and technical people should be making technical decisions, but sometimes that's not the way it works. And so what's best for the students? Well, it depends on what you're trying to get accomplished.
Right. And in my case, we actually, WordPress was being used even before I came onto the faculty more than 3 years ago. So they can't say that I asked for it. It was already there, and it was already in use. And so they've been maintaining it, and they know that people like myself, people like my co-instructor, have been going to tons of WordCamps. We're basically experts in the field. So let us help you do your job. Let us help you update the scripts. Like I said, most of what my co-instructor's been able to do is without admin access. So how do we balance that between what the administration wants us to do and deal with that student experience while still giving them the best thing and helping them, and just let go of the egos?
Those are challenges with WordPress. I would say, regardless of whether you're using it as an LMS or not. These are sort of very. We've heard these before on this show and in discussion groups before. But before we leave, I don't want to leave this topic. But I do want to ask Joseph and Kim if they've had any challenges, whether they're similar political challenges or technical challenges or buy-in or those sorts of things. So Kim's raising her hand.
Yeah, I have that one. I don't have to deal with the political challenges, and I think that's just a challenge. I was in IT once upon a time. That's just a challenge dealing with IT people, whatever new technology you want, I think. But what I would say, particularly if there are people out here maybe listening who are looking to set up WordPress, the biggest thing I would say challenge-wise is people frequently dismiss WordPress as just so easy. It's a 5-minute install, put it in, it's done, anybody can do it. And what I really find with people is they need to step back and plan. Set up your requirements, know what you want to do, because if you plan ahead, you can make sure that you're not going to run into, like Malcolm was pointing out, resource issues and scalability issues, that type of thing, because WordPress can have issues with that sometimes. Particularly if you're running multi-site and maybe you're running community apps like community plugins like BuddyPress or BBPress for forums, you're going to have to do some planning around that. So it can be challenging, but if you plan ahead with it, get to know a little bit before you just start plugging things in and throwing it all into one system, you're going to have more success in the long run without pulling your hair out as much.
Yeah, Joseph, anything to add?
I'm just sitting here nodding.
Yes, right. I've noticed that.
Saying, because I think the planning ahead and the being aware that just because something is easy to start with doesn't mean that it's going to be completely transparent. I also think IT departments often go with the model of hiring a corporate provider because they like the idea of one throat to choke. There's somebody to yell at when things go wrong, and adjusting to the fact that when things go wrong, it's on you to fix them can be tough for them. I put in the chat function here a series of 3 blog posts that I wrote back in 2010 about using WordPress as an LMS for an online course I was teaching, and then also a couple of other links to resources. So if those can be shared, I don't want to take up all the time just describing everything we did here, but I think if you could put those in show notes or something, it'd be good for people to look at.
We can do that.
Great.
Yeah, that's great.
I do want to say just a sort of another quick note, I guess, that I think really sets WordPress a step above most LMSs, and why I think it's been so beneficial for us. Something Malcolm said when we were chatting earlier is that learning doesn't stop when the class ends, and I think a lot of times every LMS in higher education works on this model of a class being something that's really bounded with certain members and nobody else is allowed to see it, and a certain start date and end date, and after the end date you don't have access to see it anymore, both for students and sometimes even for professors. So what's really been good for us about WordPress is being able to have collaboration across campuses and across semesters, and so that when students work very hard on projects and content, they are able to look back at it even 2-3 years, even after they've graduated, and really kind of continue to think through things that they learned earlier, reflect on those, and make adjustments and improvements. And just sort of that breaking out of the silo of the class is one of the ways that WordPress makes more of sort of a learning enabling system rather than a learning management system.
Yeah, I think that's great, for sure. So, is there anything else? This is a topic that got you guys got kind of interested in. Anything else we want to talk about before we move on to the next question? Any other challenges, technical, political?
I'll add just from I think that there's an unawareness of the capabilities that this thing called WordPress really has. There is a depth of functionality that is available out there, and it's just an education process. People just maybe don't know what's possible with it, and I think talking to any of the people on this panel can help through that discovery learning process. Like, is this possible? How could we do this? And not really limiting, your requirements because of it. So that's just part of at least what we end up doing when we're visiting with clients.
Yeah. So I actually, for about the last year, I've been working at the IT shop here at the University of Alabama, and I shouldn't say too much, but I'll say your comments, everyone's comments have not been totally wrong. I'll leave it at that. But there are challenges. I mean, IT shops at universities, modern universities, have a lot of challenges, and I've become intimately familiar with those challenges. And anytime you have software that's as popular as WordPress, right? It doesn't matter what software it was. It's gonna be vulnerable just because there's so many people looking at it. You're gonna have those issues, and it's more because of its popularity than anything else, right? Mm-hmm. At least that's my impression, as not a security person, but we talked about security 2 weeks ago, so that was something that is sort of pulled from that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how would you get started. Say somebody has listened to this and thought, oh, maybe I could use WordPress to do some learning management stuff. What are some good first steps, some examples, whether it's plugins or just out of the box WordPress? What could people be using this for? Within the next, if they wanted to start something and do it within the next week or month or something like that.
Well, are we talking as educators?
Whatever is interesting to you.
Let me qualify that then. The reason I'm suggesting that is not necessarily as a starting point, but to look down the road. One thing you want to keep in mind is looking at things like WordPress Multisite. Mm-hmm. Okay? If you need to tap into your students' environment so that one student doesn't necessarily affect the others, you may want to look at something like multi-sites. So at very least, you want to keep that sort of in mind. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. It's certainly not a first step, but if you're looking at it from a perspective of teaching it and teaching others how to use it and having their accounts isolated, one of the things they want to consider is something like multi-sites.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. And I think if you're planning for the long term, multi-site, possibly something like BuddyPress, which allows you to basically have a social sharing network within your system, so you can actually break out group work. They can have almost like their own Facebook group, but it's within your environment, as well as BBPress for forums. But if you really were brand new, and maybe you're just brand new to WordPress and you're like, what's my first step? I would probably just put up a membership site using Paid Memberships Pro because it's free, and it's a very friendly one. And that way you can get your students in there. You can still set up ways that they can post, comment, You can put articles in there and share them, as well as possibly popping that BuddyPress forum in, which is again, it's a free one. It's easy to set up and configure, and at least you are getting used to it as an instructor, getting in there and working with people before maybe you pull out a full-on learning management system with tests and lessons and certificates and achievements and all of that. It may be easier for some people to start small. Having said that, if you're a little bit more involved with WordPress, I personally probably would pop in a formal LMS plugin just because it does give me those other functionalities like quizzes, and I can see what they're doing and their grades and that type of thing, as well as having them easily upload lessons for me.
So I would also put in a suggestion for a real beginner if you want to just get started and try things out for one particular class. If you're an educator yourself and not trying to right away roll out a campus-wide system, edublogs, edublogs.org, is a real nice solution for just getting started, sort of going, not necessarily going rogue, but going independently to get it beginning. And it's designed for educators and designed for education, so there's kind of a lot of support there and the features that you're going to need right from the start.
I love how you said that, not going rogue, going independent. Very nice, very nicely put.
Before I let you talk, Malcolm, let's move the question on a little bit. What if they wanted to do something a little bit more? This is your opportunity as a CEO to maybe pitch your stuff a little bit too.
Okay. So like any software application, everyone on this call knows the more that you're trying to get it accomplished, the more you need to think about it a little bit. If you're trying to just add up some numbers, you might open up your calculator on your computer. If you need to do a budget, you might open up a spreadsheet and kind of think about how you want to lay everything out. If you're thinking about how to deploy an online course to an audience, well, then you're going to be thinking about that too, and how am I going to first organize my content, and do I want to charge money for that? Can I charge money for that? Who are my users going to be? So there's this whole kind of process planning that you want to do on the front end, just from a content creation standpoint, and then ultimately at the end of the day, who the audience is that you're trying to serve. And if it's public content, that's one thing. If it's potentially content that can be commercialized, that's another thing. So it all, you really want to, at least what we do is we think about who the audience, who are going to be the end consumers of that content, and what's going to be the best experience for them. And that can take a little bit of time, because it's not just the first step of getting it out there. As we know, when we go to a website and we see a blog, when the last blog post was like 2 years ago, okay, well, wait a minute, is this like even relevant anymore? So there's going to be this ongoing support and maintenance and kind of, I'm thinking of landscaping, just kind of weeding, just things you have to do to kind of keep everything fresh. And that's part of the planning. Who's going to be doing that? And whether you have staff that can do it, or it's something that you personally want to take on, or you find a company like ours that does this for people, then I think those are really the options.
Great. So we're almost out of time. So I'll leave the last question. Is there anything else that any of y'all would like to add? Anything that we didn't talk about? Any comments that on anything we have talked about that you want to add to? Just open the floor for sort of a final thing from everyone, if you'd like to say something. No takers? Shanta? Yeah.
I'd love to say that the biggest thing that you have to be clear in your mind, no matter which part of an educational institution or not you're in, is have an understanding of what is going to be the use of WordPress to your end user. Like I said, in our case, the students are not using WordPress specifically as excuse me, can't talk, jet lag.
Yeah.
LMS. They are learning how to use it, period. But we, as instructors, need it to function as a multi-site, as an LMS, to do their grading, to all those other things. So I think you have to be very clear as to not going overboard, but also be very clear as to what your students, because that's what we're all here for ultimately, whoever your students are, is have an understanding of what they are going to get out of the WordPress installation.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Any final words? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. It's been great. I learned a lot about. I really didn't know much about WordPress as an LMS, so I feel like we covered a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. And I think there's some interesting discussions that maybe we could follow up in coming weeks. There was we were having some discussions beforehand that I thought were really interesting about, what do you do with all this content once you've created it? There are options that universities have that maybe not taking advantage of. Maybe we'll do a separate podcast on that. But for now, we'll say goodbye. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Shanta, for joining us. It's been great to have you on, and I appreciate your time. And I think that'll be about it. Thank you all.
Great.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.